let's be clear, when most teams fail, often the number one reason is a human related failure, not a process related failure or something else. And it's because we didn't do the hard work at the beginning that facilitates better business outcomes.
Hello, and welcome to Love as a Business Strategy, a podcast that brings humanity to the workplace. We're here to talk about business. We want to tackle topics that most business leaders shy away from. We believe that humanity and love should be at the center of every successful business. I am your host, Jeff Ma, and as always, I'm here to have conversations and hear stories with real people about real business and really real life. And my guest today is Dr. John Frey. He develops and he leads HPE's practice for customer collaboration on sustainability and IT efficiency. John partners with HPE's largest customers, stakeholders, and governments to develop low carbon solutions to business challenges, share best practices, and drive new business opportunities. And John frequently shares his knowledge with media all around the world, including in a documentary called Clouded 2, Does Cloud Cost the Earth? And prior to HPE, HP and Compaq, he worked for Boeing, NASA, and Arco Alaska. John developed his leadership skills both from earned degrees in engineering, divinity, and leadership, and as well as being a leader through leading volunteer emergency response teams for municipalities, government, and academic institutions. He's an ordained pastor serving congregations for over 20 years as both a minister and musician, and he is my honored guest today here on this episode as we dive into servant leadership a little bit. So with that, John, how are you today? How are you doing?
I'm doing great. The sun is shining and it's a beautiful day out and a great day to talk about leadership as well.
Every day is a great day to talk about leadership in my world. So absolutely. John, I start with a question that never gets old for me, but I want to know, what is your passion and how did you find it?
Yeah, so it's a great question. My passion is helping people be the person they were meant to be and trying to do that myself as well. And because of the business I'm in as well, I'm always looking to say, how do I leave the world a better place when I leave the world than when I found it? So that drives me as well, although I have to say it took about 50 years to come to that perspective.
Well, I don't know we'll have time to cover all 50 years, but maybe you could start us off at some maybe pivotal point, because we are talking about servant leadership today. As the kind of, I know we talked before the show a little bit about why that's important to you, but I'd love for you to share maybe where your focus and expertise and experience with servant leadership really started for you.
Yeah, it really started in the scouts, and that was what the scouting program was all about, was having leaders from the community of young people rather than having the adults be the leaders. And as I was coming through the scouts, my dad was my scout leader, but my dad was also a volunteer firefighter. And if you didn't lead teams of volunteers to respond, the community had no fire protection service. And so I did that for a couple of years, went off to college and started volunteering at my university's student run ambulance service. Again, the university, large university, almost 50,000 students at the time there on the campus, and all of the university grounds around almost an entire county in Texas. I went to Texas A&M University, and the ambulance service was student run. So if someone dialed 911 or the campus's emergency number, and there were no responders there, the ambulance didn't respond. So it was really about, how can I lead other volunteers, make them feel included, and make them want to keep coming back, including some situations that frankly were really dangerous for them or certainly scary to them, depending on what we were responding to at the time.
I love that thought process that I went through when we first talked, and you mentioned that. It took me down this rabbit hole of incredible introspection and thought, because I never thought of it this way. But when you have to lead volunteers, my wife leads the PTA for the school, and everyone's giving their time freely, but as a leader, it removes a lot of the levers that we rely on nowadays, right? of like, oh, threatening to fire or
Yeah.
threatening like any sort of like, if you what are you gonna do? Fire a volunteer? Like, okay, bye. I'll just leave. Like they lose nothing. And so all you're left with is influence and positive influence for the most part, making people feel valued, making people feel like, and that's an incredible way to think about servant leadership, because in the business there's so many other factors at play, and I think all these other influences kind of get put to the wayside.
Well, they do, and in fact, what I have discovered, and it's my personal experience, that continuing to lead groups of volunteers, and I continue to do that today, by the way, um, made me a better leader in the business community because I didn't rely on those heavy-handed sorts of techniques. Really, for me, leading was inviting people to be part of a team that's off doing something better. So my team, I remind them all the time, we focused on technology efficiency. But the reason we're doing it is because the world wants to use technology, and we make the world a worse place if we don't use technology efficiently and use technology to do some things that drive efficiency as well. So I always try to point them back to that because so many, for example, in the sustainability communities that we're part of, think of their job in terms of lowering carbon footprint. And I like to keep reminding them, well, why is that important?
Yeah.
Because when we don't do that, the world is transformed in ways that impact marginalized communities that can't adapt to their changing environment. Either, it's too hot, they can't grow crops anymore, they don't have access to fresh water. So for me, it's how do we motivate people to want to do their best in the role that they're in? So they want to show up every day and make that a part of their life because frankly, there's other places they could work or volunteer. So they're there because they want to make a difference and they're there because they like making a difference with the people they like being around and that they're spending a significant part of their life with. So for me, whether it was volunteer or paid, those were important principles to help people bring out the best of themselves. And in some cases, learn a lot of new things, or in our practice, where we're constantly having to develop mechanisms and skills and approaches to do what we do. Nobody else said this is how it should be done, and we're implementing. We're actually inventing the best practice as we go. And that keeps people really excited and wanting to come back to work every day.
Love it. And you're on the podcast Love as a Business Strategy, so I have to ask, as we dive right into it, what is your method or philosophy around how you incorporate love into how you lead? Because we're talking about servant leadership, which is like this kind of defined term,
Yeah.
and at times a little bit much because we're not, there's a lot to it. There's a whole principle and everything. But at the end of the day, we are talking about the simple act of serving and putting other people's needs first. What does that look like for you as it pertains to like love and how you practice with your volunteer groups and with your corporate or work group?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and part of it is meeting people where they are. At any given time on a large extended team, somebody's getting ready to get married. Somebody might be going through a divorce. Somebody might have just lost a spouse or a mother or a dad or had a child, and all of that actually comes into that work interaction. If I'm about to put them on an ambulance, for example, I want to make sure that I'm not sending someone out on a CPR in progress call that just lost a loved family member. Perhaps we'll do a quick staff shift, for example, or at least pay much more attention to them on the call. The same way at work, it's how do we let people be where they are? I had an employee just this last week whose family lives in Beirut. And with all the conflict in Beirut, he was distracted. And I finally said, why don't you go see your family for a little while and make sure they're okay so that you can be less distracted when you're back in the office? Another way is really, I don't ask my team to do anything I'm not willing to do first. So early on, for example, in my experience with a rescue squad in Maryland, where we were on a group of volunteers on every Friday night from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. Saturday morning, the inevitable things that are on there is washing the apparatus, checking to make sure you have all the medical supplies, all the way to cleaning the bathrooms. And so I, as their leader, took cleaning the bathrooms first and said, look, I'm not going to ask you guys to do something that you don't want to do or that you haven't seen me do. And the same way down to cleaning the apparatus. I, as a leader, could have said, it's time, y'all go do that. But instead said, come on, I'm going to go do this. Why don't you guys join me? And you get a really different reaction from people. And then we celebrate together and we cry together. If we lose a patient, for example, we would all take a moment and remember that person. We did our best and we knew we did our best, but it wasn't enough in that particular circumstance. Or when one of our team wins or, appears in a documentary or whatever, then we all rally around and celebrate that accomplishment as a group. And that, I think, helps the team come together. And that's where the love shines through. That wasn't something we had to do, but it showed that we really care for one another. They're more than just coworkers or other volunteers.
And when I think about the context of what you do in the group of volunteers coming together, it all makes so much sense. I think anyone hearing that story can kind of relate to how that love builds and how those acts come about. Maybe you could help bridge, though. I think more people have more in common with your HPE environment than with that environment. So how do you bring that type of stuff? What does it look like once it's crossed the line into our jobs, our paid jobs, our livelihoods, and these corporate environments? What does that look like? Because it's not, you're not, losing people's, in your work at least, you're not losing lives and gathering around and crying about it. But what might that look like instead?
Yeah, well, some of the things are the same though. The divorces and the births or the deaths in family, it is coming together. And I will say, in my HPE world, because I lead a global team, that's a little harder remotely. So I've managed to meet everyone on the team in person at some point in our time together, but that's not always the case. And so I try to understand, if they're married, what their spouse's name is, and if there's some major life event, helping them through that as best I can, or certainly being open to it. I think the other thing is recognizing the cultural differences. I've got a very culturally diverse team, different religious traditions, different ethnic traditions, and in some cases, although not directly on my team, they interact with other cultures where they're often not recognized as a first class type of citizen. So it's, how do we work through those, anticipate some of those opportunities, and stand up and support them? If I have another team person from another team that says, I don't want to work with that person because of their ethnic background, as a leader, I can stand up and say, that's not how we do business with our company. So let's work through this, and I'll facilitate working through this together. But we're not going to have you exclude somebody just because of their ethnicity or something else. Often it's gender as well. There's parts of the world that don't recognize or don't value, in some cases, the women on my team as much as they would value a man, or don't give the same level of respect. And so we try to work through those situations as well, because again, really what we're about is, if the team succeeds, we help HPE succeed. And HPE, really at our underpinning, want to be a force for good. So in everything we do, we try to drive that.
It sounds to some, a lot of work, like we come in, we have deadlines, we have projects, we have numbers to hit, and there's enough to do as it is. And everything you just said requires this extra effort, this extra thing that doesn't necessarily contribute directly to the bottom line or something like that. Again, I'm voicing what, just for the listeners' sake, it's not what I believe. Obviously, if you're here, you should know that. But that's what you get, right? That's kind of where people go. So what's keeping more people from doing this? What makes it so hard for other people to try this? And how can we overcome that?
All great questions. And in fact, that runs very parallel even with the domain that we're in, that people perceive gets in the way, adds cost. And in fact, what we found is just the opposite. In the same way, from a leadership perspective, it does take some more work on the leader's part, no doubt. And it does require even looking at your own preconceived notions and biases, which frankly is hard to do. But for me, what I found is when you're willing to do that, it actually makes a lot of things go faster and go quicker because you have confidence in your teammates. You know that they are watching your back and you're watching theirs, in a metaphorical sense, at least. It also means that we can accelerate some of our work together because some of the cultural things that trip up other teams. And let's be clear, when most teams fail, often the number one reason is a human related failure, not a process related failure or something else. And it's because we didn't do the hard work at the beginning that facilitates better business outcomes. So I believe my team performs at a really high level, partially because of the way we interact with one another. We think of one another as more than just colleagues. Um, when I meet my teammates that are in other countries in person, and I go to put out my hand, they want a hug. And it's that kind of relationship that we've built, and that enables us to do a much better job from that perspective. And we genuinely like one another as well. I mean, any person on my team, if somebody said, "Here, do you want to go on a vacation for a week and go with they and their spouse?" My wife and I would say, absolutely yes. They have seen my wife, if only on video calls. I've seen them. We're on team calls and their animals come walking through. That's really cool. It shows that we're really getting to know one another at a deeper level. So I don't think it actually takes longer or costs more. I think it's a little upfront work that pays a lot of dividends downstream.
Mm, couldn't have put it better myself. And what I'm hearing you say is that it comes down to relationships, and it comes down to making sure we prioritize relationships as part of the work and not just as extraneous to the work.
Sure. And it also means, by the way, that we don't always agree with one another. And that's the other thing. I've purposely tried to build a really diverse team ethnically, from difference of opinion, because I think we get a better output at that point. And to do that, though, we've got to have an environment where it's okay to question the boss, where I'm not viewed as the leader. I almost am viewed as a facilitator that lets us have a robust debate, figure out what we think is the right path forward, and then go do that. So, absolutely, yes. So, it's a variety of ways. So, not to suggest it's just a path where we all always agree with one another. That's never the case. We would
Sure.
not have gotten to where we did if we always agreed with one another.
Of course. My last kind of curiosity in this, going back to this analogy of the volunteer moving into the corporate space, what is the equivalent of the cleaning the toilets, the bathroom? Like, you say, I'll be the first to do this. I'm not going to ask anyone to do anything that I wouldn't do myself. What does that look like when you translate that type of? Because to me, that was like iconic servant leadership, right? Like you're
Yeah.
serving others, you're doing something that you're kind of going first. You're putting yourself into, like, you're showing and leading by example. What does that look like in corporate environments where, cleaning toilets isn't necessarily on the list, but what does that look like instead?
Yeah, so there's a couple things. My folks are all on a technology career path. And so one of the things that path requires as they get to higher levels is to be mentored and to mentor others that are coming up the path behind them, so that we don't have to learn the same concepts over and over as new people come in. And so in my case, I've tried to model that by both being a mentor to others, including others outside the group. So, because again, it's a global function, I get younger technologists from all over the world that want to meet me, hear about my career path, and be mentored. In the same way, even though I'm a little over a year from retirement, I'm still being mentored because I think I always have something more to learn. So that's one way. Another way is we, as a great benefit, are given 60 hours a year to volunteer, that HPE pays us to go out and leverage our skills to volunteer with nonprofits. So rather than tell my team, you should go do this, I do it and then talk about that experience, and have just made it a normal part of our staff conversations to do those sorts of things. For broader employee events, I'll volunteer to be on the logistics team for setting them up and taking them down. Another one, and it's one I mirror for my employees, particularly those that are at events with me, is I speak at a lot of events a year, probably 50 or so events. And you know, the people that always get ignored, that sound person that puts your microphone on you, the logistics person that was there till midnight the night before, making sure the staging was there and all of those things. I go out of my way to thank those people because it's a thankless job. If you do great, nobody pats you on the back. If something goes wrong, you're sought at and criticized very early on. So for me, it's going out of my way to notice those people and thank them. And my staff at this point doesn't think I'm doing that just because they're around me, but they all notice because then they'll ask me later, why did you know that person? No, just met them. So why were you engaging with them? And my point is, I'm no better than them because I'm on stage. I can't be effective on stage if I don't have all of these other people do their jobs well that bring it off. So helping them see that broader picture. So to me, those are just a couple examples of the cleaning the toilet or the job that people don't think that needs done or always wants to push to somebody else. I try to make sure I mirror those behaviors.
Love that. John, learned a lot in a very, very quick amount of time. Appreciate the time you've spent here. If anybody wants to connect, reach out, or learn more, what avenues might they take to find you?
Yeah, absolutely. So my website is drjohnfrey, drjohnfrey.com. And there you can learn a lot about my business life, my volunteer life, and even my ministry life. But if you want to reach out directly to me, the easiest way is john@drjohnfrey.com.
Awesome. So you're saying reach out, connect, let's have a conversation. You're open to it. Love it.
Yeah, absolutely. I learn by learning from others as well. And I am happy to share my experiences as well.
Beautiful. Last and final closing question that I like to ask from time to time. What's one behavior you'll see every great leader do?
Oh, I think a great behavior is to acknowledge and recognize others because the leaders often get the credit for something that someone else did. So be really intentional of saying thank you.
Love it. Thank you so much. And thank you to our leaders who are listening and our aspiring leaders who are listening. We appreciate your support in the show. Hopefully, you're still checking out the book, Love is a Business Strategy. Go visit drjohnfrey.com and also tell your friends, share the podcast. We'll be here every 2 weeks. So, with that, we'll see you in the next one. Thank you and goodbye.